Happy Wednesday to everybody. Josh here on The Wrong Lead, joined as always by Mr. Andrew Champagne for another episode of Drank and Champagne. Andrew, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm hanging in there. Made a couple of moves over the last couple of days that I'm very excited about. Got a new couch delivered. That was very exciting. New couch delivered. And here's the other thing. If you have an applause that might be louder than that, I was smart enough to pay to have other people put it together. There we go. Yeah. Pro tip. Do that. It's just so worth it, and not having to worry about putting things together in an incorrect way. It's just absolutely magical. I've put velvet covers on it. I chose velvet because my cat is a jerk and cats eat velvet. So far so good on that front, knock on wood. But yeah, other than that, couple of cool things going on. Went to the gym today. So if you're watching this on YouTube, first of all, don't forget to hit all those wonderful little buttons down there. But you're also seeing a little, post-workout glow / sweat / if I look tired, it's because I just went 3 miles on a treadmill. So yeah, happy to be here. Happy to be able to tackle a bunch of cool little topics, including the Lecomte on Saturday, a race that, Josh, you and I both sort of agree acts as the kickoff to the road to the Kentucky Derby, at least after the calendar switches over to a new year.
Yeah, I think once these, and I believe these are 20-point races, but once these grade 3 start kind of kicking off, I really feel like, all right, this is when the Derby season really starts. This is, I believe, the race last year. Was it Rocket Can who won this race last year?
Hold on just a second. Let me ask the source of all knowledge. Instant Coffee.
Instant Coffee won this race. Okay. I want to say this is the race that Caleb bet me a bourbon bottle that no horse from this race would make the.
You're thinking maybe the Holy Bull at Gulfstream, because that was
maybe
the race
it was a
Rocket
Holy Bull.
Can won. Yes,
Yeah.
The Holy Bull was the first race on that road to the Derby. I remember Rocket Can won. I think it was Shadow Dragon ran second. That was the race that Forte wasn't quite ready for. So yeah, that one I think is the one you're talking about. But no, the Lecomte over the last couple of years has drawn a number of very good horses. That was the one race Epicenter didn't win a couple of years ago. Call Me Midnight, trained by Keith DeSormo, won that one. Not like I needed Epicenter that day and still remember it. Just saying.
Yeah. But yeah, this is really the kickoff. This is when, I think that we really start to see the Derby horses come out, or at least the horses that are gonna be players in the Derby. Not necessarily. You don't necessarily get the winners necessarily showing up and winning these races, at least in the modern day, or the hyper modern day, whatever you want to call the last couple of years. You don't really see them kind of breaking out here.
Can we call them the Dark Ages?
I mean, hey, look at production meeting that we had, our brief production meeting we had before the podcast. You told me, and I quote, "Let's not be super negative all the time." So
if you're seeing this on YouTube, you see that I'm smiling and that I'm clearly tongue-in-cheek when I say that. If you look on horse racing Twitter, it's as though the sky is falling. Shocker, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting time. And I thought this would be kind of a good time to kind of talk about a couple of things. So one, obviously this is the kickoff. We'll get to the Lecomte a little bit later. But I was thinking a little bit about the calendar for this year, because I think this is obviously going to be a very unique year. Maybe not as unique as 2020, but unique nonetheless. We start with these Derby preps, and then that kind of rolls into, I believe the Southwest is the week after. And we have Pegasus coming up, and with Pegasus, I feel like at least the last couple years, there's just been a very, very steady drop in the quality of that race. So
It hasn't been steady, Josh. It's dropped off a cliff.
yeah, because I remember the year. Oh man, why am I forgetting? What's the McCarthy horse?
City of Light.
City of Light. Won the Pegasus. And there's obviously that picture of McCarthy looking just super sad after the race. Maybe a day or two after the race when
I
they
believe
were
that was
shipping.
a Zoe Metz photo. We want to make sure we give the photographer credit there. That was an absolutely incredible photo. City of Light that year, had he stayed in training, had the potential to do Dr. Fager like things, at least for this era. That was a horse that could have dominated at any distance from 6 furlongs to a mile and a quarter. That Pegasus World Cup, he crushed Accelerate, who was the previous year's Breeders' Cup Classic winner, who had reeled off a bunch of very impressive Grade 1 wins for trainer John Sadler. Having said that, I'm going to reel off some names. This is courtesy of our friends over at Horse Racing Nation as possibles for the Pegasus World Cup field. We're a week and a half out. There could be some defections, there could be some late additions, but according to Horse Racing Nation, this is the field. First Mission, National Treasure, Hoist the Gold, Saudi Crown, Senor Buscador, Skippy Longstocking, New Grange, O'Connor, Dynamic One, Trademark, Il Miracolo, and Grand Aspen. So, at the very least, you've got a pretty big field of 12 horses. From a betting standpoint, that's a good thing. Here's a little trivia question for you, Josh. Those 12 horses, you know how many Grade 1 wins they have all put together?
Ooh, two.
One.
Just the Preakness, huh?
National Treasure won the Preakness, and that's it. Now, to be fair, in prior years, the Clark and the Cigar Mile were Grade 1 races, and those winners do, at least according to this, come back and run in the Pegasus. So there is a little bit of an asterisk there because in the past that had been a Grade 1. Both of those races had been. So I understand that to a point. But Josh, what are we doing to ensure our best horses run in these kinds of races? When the Pegasus World Cup was conceived, remember the idea. You might not remember this because anything prior to 5 minutes ago, you just have absolutely no idea
Mm-hmm.
of. So
Yep.
here's a little history lesson for you. Way, way, way back in the mid 2010s, the Pegasus World Cup got rechristened that after being known as the Don Handicap for many, many decades at Gulfstream Park. The Pegasus was designed as a massive purse race that would keep horses in training for at least one more start. And the very first year that the Pegasus World Cup was in existence, it drew Arrogate and California Chrome in a rematch from the previous year's Breeders' Cup Classic. It was California Chrome's very last race before he went off to stud. Arrogate wound up running off the screen. California Chrome, I believe, got hurt in that particular race and never fired. But you look at that race, and there have been a couple of hits. Gunrunner stayed in training for one more race. City of Light stayed in training for one more race. The Pegasus structure, though, has changed because those who are familiar with the race will remember when Connections would have to pony up, I believe it was $1 million for a slot in the race. And then you could play games with the slot, you could lease it out, you could do whatever you wanted. But that was part of the funding for one of the richest races in the world. The Pegasus has seen a shift away from that format to where it's just another Grade 1 race that doesn't draw any top tier horses. And that is a real shame because that is not what the race was intended to do. The Pegasus World Cup was supposed to be a big, huge extravaganza for 8 figures in purses that was supposed to draw some of these horses and extend their careers, if only by one start. It's not doing that anymore. You may as well just rechristen it the Don and be done with it. Now, it does give Gulfstream an excuse to sell a whole bunch of tickets for a whole bunch of money, sell a whole bunch of booze, bring out a whole bunch of musical acts that nobody our age is even remotely familiar with, which is a separate conversation about marketing and the way the sport is being presented to younger people that would probably require multiple podcasts for us to address. But I say this not to be negative, but to be realistic. We want to highlight the good things in this game. There are a couple of really good things that are going on in this game. Kudos to Fairgrounds for releasing their 13 race card a full week ahead of schedule. That gives us handicappers a lot of time to digest and figure out what we're going to do. It also allows track management to be able to promote the horses that are in the race because, hey, the races have already been drawn. It's a really easy thing to do that more tracks should be able to do on their big days. That's a really good thing. Josh, I got to tell you, the first question any marketing person needs to ask about an event is, why should people care? I'm struggling to figure out why I should care about this year's Pegasus World Cup. Can't do it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've talked about this on previous podcasts.
I'm pretty sure everyone with a podcast has talked about this in some form or fashion. It's
Yeah,
almost like someone with the power to change things isn't listening.
but I mean, I'm just talking about just the general apathy, right? That's kind of come over. I think some very passionate people. We've talked about this before. Like, we make no money from this.
Now,
This is completely a passion project
though, to
for
be
all of us.
fair, just to be fair, just as a cheap plug, if you like what we do have an On the Wrong Lead shop where you can buy shirts and frisbees and a whole bunch of stuff to make things a little bit easier for your favorite podcast hosts. And if you like what we do, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, spread the word about the things that we do. It's a lot of fun being able to do this stuff, and that's what it is. It's a passion project.
Yep.
So,
And
yeah.
it's been tough. With I'm not playing as much. I haven't since the Breeders' Cup, and it's I've been paying attention here and there, but I mean, even the Lecomte completely snuck up on me. I used to count down the days till Santa Anita would open up, and saying I could play Santa Anita again, and Oak Lawn, and I think some of it is dilution. Oak Lawn starting in December now. When I first started, it was late January
Yep.
that they probably were starting. But you have that. You have just, I mean, the weather's just been garbage as of late as well, which hasn't helped things.
Poor Matt Dinnerman coming from California, going to Hot Springs, Arkansas, and being greeted with the winter weather that he has been greeted with. And speaking of poor Matt Dinnerman's ducks, they were supposed to be migrating to avoid the nonsense, and instead they're stuck in it. Can we all just, send our thoughts and prayers to Matt Dinnerman's ducks during this trying time? Love you, buddy.
But yeah, and then you look at these fields. I mean, I think the Lecomte is fine, right? And we'll talk
The
about that.
Lecomte's not bad.
Yeah.
And honestly, there's a couple of stakes races this coming Saturday at Fairgrounds that are pretty good. It's a good card.
Yep.
A discussion can be had about 13 races maybe being a little too much, but the stakes races, they're fine. We mentioned the Pegasus World Cup. We've talked about the Pegasus World Cup. There's also the Saudi Cup coming up in February. There's also the Dubai World Cup coming up in March. My stance on that is going to tick off a whole bunch of people because I will never fault American interests who have a monster from going over to Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates and taking the money that's offered. Because if you have a once in a lifetime horse and you see those kinds of purses and you know this is your only shot, go take their money. Good on you. As an Eclipse Award voter and as a Hall of Fame voter, I cannot in good conscience consider those races as part of a horse's resume. The stuff that goes on that we're not going to get into because we are not a politics broadcast, and many's the time I think that our listeners are grateful for that. I just can't support those races in that context. I can't do it. And I know White Abario is preparing for the Saudi Cup. I know a couple of people that are very loud and very passionate White Abario fans are thinking he's going to go over there and run a hole in the wind, and he probably will. If the White Abario that showed up on Breeders' Cup Classic Day shows up for the Saudi Cup, he's going to be pretty tough. But again, the excitement just isn't there. And if White Abario goes over to the Saudi Cup, wins by 6 lengths, when is he going to start next? Bless you, by the way.
Thank you.
Clutch, by the way, I appreciate you muting your microphone so that, the many listeners we have didn't hear you sneeze. But if he runs in the Saudi Cup and wins, what do we have to look forward to him running in? Probably the Met Mile in June. And after the Met Mile, maybe the Whitney. And after the Whitney, maybe the Breeders' Cup Classic. 4 starts. I can't get excited about a 4-start campaign. I understand my standards probably need to come down with the way horses are campaigned, with the way horses are bred. My goodness, even 10 years ago, if you would have told somebody that probably the best older horse in training was going to run 4 times, and some would consider that a trying campaign, they'd look at you like you had 9 heads.
I do think it's funny that you just completely like you're like I understand them going for the money, but I ain't gonna vote for them. Uh, but I have like once again we can talk about like
That
I
like, everybody's got their stances on that
yeah
stuff. That's the one I can live with as a human being.
um but I mean I think you kind of went into the next point, which is where I'm saying that the Pegasus at this point I feel like has been um made irrelevant by those Middle Eastern races because now those races don't exist. Now all of a sudden we have White Abario running in this race, and I think it makes it just that him alone makes this a much more interesting race. Um, I actually had pulled up the probables, but um, for Saudi Cup, White Abario. They have Saudi Crown written as pointing there, Arabian Night, uh, Ushba Tesoro. I mean, those horses make any race, any Grade One older horse race much more interesting, and they're not in this race, so uh, you can't fault them for chasing just the much more insane purses that they have over there. You see it in every sport at this point, with golf, with soccer, or football, as people like to call it. Um, they're offering money and people are going. And unfortunately for horse racing, with us only having so many horses of that caliber, even losing two of the top 7 or 8 horses just completely dilutes the Grade One pool that we have here. So
Yeah.
it's tough, and I think this year it's really been just not emphasized, but you really see just how thin the Grade One classic distance horse. And I mean, mile and eighth isn't even a classic distance technically, but the distance horses, the 2-turn dirt horses here, just how thin the pool is, and how losing a White Abario to the Middle East. I mean, just how much that just dilutes, I guess, the pool a little bit. Because you go back and you look at some of the horses that have won this race in the last couple of years, right? You already mentioned Arrogant, Gunrunner, City of Light. Then you had just the real weird year where Mucho Gusto won, and that was kind of like I think when people started kind of scratching their head, like the horses didn't really show up for this. And then obviously Nick's Go had two great performances in this race, and he was a great horse. Life is Good got the better of him the second time around, and then Art Collector, which I mean, Art Collector is a cool horse and was definitely a big name his 3-year old, 4-year old. But last year, like Art Collector kind of came out of nowhere, I think, to win that race. And I think like that year, the Mucho Gusto year, kind of just like you start to see, and then you see this year's field, and it's just like, yeah, it's I don't know, it's a tough spot to be in.
It is. And you mentioned the cannibalization of big races. We've been talking about the Pegasus World Cup, but perhaps an even better example of cannibalization, Josh, is what's happened to the Santa Anita Handicap. I worked at HRTV, which was based at Santa Anita Park, for about a year and a half in the mid 2010s before that got bought by TVG, which is now, of course, FanDuel TV. There was a year where the Santa Anita Handicap drew Mucho Macho Man, Game On Dude, some real heavy hitters. It's a 5-horse field, but it was a grade 1 race in all caps. Game On Dude ran a hole in the wind, ran a mile and a quarter, and I believe 158. It was an absolutely outstanding performance. And that was a grade 1 race in all capital letters. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to run for 8 figures over in Dubai or Saudi Arabia? Or are you going to stay at Santa Anita for less than $1 million? Especially if you have an older horse that would be worth significantly more in the breeding barn, and you need to justify the investment of keeping that horse in training. Because the math in the breeding industry makes it so that if you have a very good horse and that horse already has a resume as a 3-year-old, there's no reason to run it 4. If you have a horse that, say, commands a $25,000 stud fee and is going to see 200 mares, why would you run the horse? That's risk-free money. That's just smart business. And I can't fault one person or one individual for retiring a horse early when that horse is sound, but you can fault the business model because we've gone from breeding to race to racing to breed to now, are we already in the breeding to sell era?
I mean,
It's a terrifying thought. And when the most important race some horses will run is 1 furlong at a 2-year-old sale against the clock, I am all for discussion. I am all for debate. I am all for people from varying backgrounds coming together and preserving their interests in such a way to where when people compromise, everyone knows what everyone else is giving up and we all work together. There is no justification for the most important race some horses run being 1 furlong against a clock on a souped up surface when they are nowhere near fully developed. There is no justification for that until you start looking at the money that changes hands at those sales. It's absolutely eye-popping. There's a lot that's wrong with this game that we need to come together and we need to fix in some way, shape, or form. It's going to require sacrifice from a lot of people, though, and I don't know if those people want to do that. Sad but true.
yeah, it's just going to be like I said. We talk about the cannibalization. The Santa Anita handicap, and the biggest memory I have of that is obviously the 2020 rendition of it, where my friend Chase Sessum's favorite horse of all time.
His second favorite horse of all time.
Well, okay, after
No balls. After no balls.
no, his favorite horse of all time is Whitmore. He'll tell you that straight up. But
Maybe not after the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint, man. Not
no.
after that race he ran on Derby Day. Just saying.
But Combatant won the 2020 Sanity Handicap, and to the point where people were congratulating him via text message, and Chase did not have a single cent on Combatant that day. He had finally written the breakup letter, so I'm sure you can talk to him about that on this
Yeah,
week's
cheap plug,
podcast.
by the way, for those of you that listen to Chase's fantastic Notorious OTB podcast. I'll be on Friday. We'll be talking about not just the Lecomte, but all of the stakes races coming up on Saturday at Fairgrounds. I believe there are 5 or 6 of them. It's going to be a fun time. Chase is a great guy. I love going on his show. So if you're looking for something to listen to on Friday as you handicap, give that a download, pop it on in the background as you're looking at the form.
Yep, and I'll be on tomorrow to talk about the late pick five at Oak Lawn on Friday, I believe. So, or sorry, Wednesday. So today, obviously we're recording this on Tuesday night, but you won't hear this till Wednesday. But yeah, you know, but kind of I guess going a little bit further into it. Now we have your favorite thing, which is Saratoga sneaking in to months not named July and August. Uh, we have the what are they going to call it? Are they just calling it the Belmont Stakes Festival at Saratoga or whatever?
Yeah, I think so. And listen, when this was initially proposed, I winced. I'm a traditionalist. The Belmont Stakes is run at a mile and a half. I understand they needed to move it. And for a year or two, it'll be fine. It'll be cool. Saratoga knows how to throw a party. That'll be fine. I'm a little nervous about what the 2026 Belmont Stakes is going to look like, though, both from a distance standpoint and from the standpoint of where it is on the calendar. I know that Naira and Churchill are not the ones that are looking to change the Triple Crown schedule. That had previously been the Stronach Group, who, by the way, is getting out of Maryland racing. That might prove to be the one thing that holds the Triple Crown schedule together, at least for the next couple of years until someone decides it needs to get changed. But it'll be fine the year or two in 2024 and 2025. It'll be cool seeing Saratoga packed. It's not going to be cheap to get in there. It's not going to be in any way the kind of Saratoga that I grew up going to, where if you were under the age of 10 years old, you got in for free and you had to go under the turnstile. That was a problem for me because I got tall at a pretty young age. So, yeah, that was not a fun having to dip down and limbo under. But it's going to be fine. That much will be okay. I'm approaching it from a realist perspective, assuming the weather cooperates, and please God, let the weather cooperate up there after what happened all last summer. That's going to be okay. What I don't want is for the next 2 years to happen and someone to get the idea we should start Saratoga in June every year.
That's exactly what's
No,
going to happen.
boutique meets are boutique meets for a reason, and I can't get behind that or support that idea.
What do you think?
So
What do you think is going to happen when Patrick McKenna decides that no coolers are going to be allowed in Saratoga anymore?
I think that might finally be the impetus to getting him off of Twitter.
I'm waiting
I,
for it.
I've no, full disclosure, I have nothing against Patrick McKenna. I've never met the guy. Him going after people who complained about Saratoga pricing was a really, really bad look. And if he thinks people have forgotten that, they haven't.
No, I mean, I've yeah, the pricing with stuff is crazy. Um, we've the every time we've gone, we've brought in a cooler of beer, a very nice beer, nonetheless. A buddy of mine, we'll bring in sneak in a bottle of glass bottle of whiskey occasionally, but I mean, it's part of the thing, right? That's part of the allure of having the of Saratoga. And I think if that does go away, that's definitely going to be there's going to be a riot. But I don't know. A buddy of mine had mentioned the possibility of that. And I don't know if he was just like trying to think up of bad ideas at the time or what. But I just like thought like, can you imagine the absolute just
That's not the worst idea I can think of, as bad as it is. The worst idea I could think of would be charging for picnic tables across all the picnic tables. I
Well,
could
they already
see
charged for some of them.
well, yeah, they already charge for some of them. They get more and more every year as far as how many they do. I could potentially see that happening, and I hope it doesn't. But I could also see them trying to say, hey, look, you want to be in the picnic area for the Belmont Stakes? It's going to cost you. I really hope that doesn't materialize.
Yeah, I don't know. It's this is just like I said. This is it's gonna be another kind of weird year, and I think we've waxed poetic about.
Well, if you want a weird year, consider this. With the plans in Maryland being what they are, this year they're going to run at Pimlico for the Preakness. In 2025, I believe they're going to start renovations of Pimlico to modernize the property, and they're going to move the Preakness to Laurel. So your 2025 Triple Crown will be the Kentucky Derby at Churchill Downs, the Preakness at Laurel, and the Belmont at Saratoga. That's weird.
Yeah, that's that's very that's crazy.
It's trippy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know too much about what's going on at Laurel. I know the plan is to renovate Pimlico and then close Laurel, but that we don't have enough time to dig into that
You
one.
know, I'm really old, and I remember when the plan was to run at Laurel year round and close Pimlico.
That was pretty recent.
That's the joke.
But yeah, it's just I don't know. It's a weird. It's just going to be a weird year. We'll see how the experiment with Saratoga goes. I've often said that I think with the uncertainty of the weather there, I absolutely see them pulling an Oaklawn, much to your chagrin, and only running. What is it? Do they run Tuesdays right now?
Saratoga,
Yeah,
no,
no, it's just Wednesdays.
they don't run Mondays and Tuesdays. They run Wednesday
Wednesday.
through Sunday right now.
Yeah, so I could see them doing keeping the same amount of dates and doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
You know, if it stays 40 days, I don't hate that because then you're preserving stuff and you're making Saratoga races still feel special because there aren't a lot of them. If you
No.
stretch the calendar out to where it's 4 days a week for 4 months, then we got a problem. But it just, there was never going to be a perfect solution for the Belmont. Running it at Saratoga, at least, is going to make the next couple of years a little different and not in a bad way. Like, I'm a little bit better with it now than when they initially suggested it. The distance thing still irks me. Believe it or not, there are people on Twitter who are convinced Naira needed to make the Belmont a mile and 5/8, which, if you think the Belmont was going to struggle to get entries at a mile and a half, no way they were going to run a mile and 3/8. It just wasn't going to fly. But I sincerely hope that that isn't going to influence any decisions made after the 2 years Saratoga has to host the Belmont in 2024 and 2025. That's the thing I'm a little nervous about.
Yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. We'll see what happens this year. We'll see what changes they make for Belmont. I will say that any changes, and maybe this is me just I don't know. I've seen this happen too often. Any changes that they quote unquote say they're testing out for Saratoga, or for Belmont week at Saratoga, that's only for that week. Get ready because those are probably going to be permanent changes. So,
It
um,
wouldn't surprise me. And I think they sort of saw some of this coming, what with the additional premium seating options that they had put in over the last couple of years and the Wilson shoot going a mile. I mean, there were reasons that they were doing this. I happen to share a conspiracy theory with one of our close friends, Ed DeRosa, and tend to believe that there is a non 0% chance we will see a Breeders' Cup at Saratoga at some point reasonably soon. I know they want to have a Breeders' Cup at Belmont, and I think that's ultimately position A. But The weather at Saratoga isn't that much worse than the weather at Keeneland that time of year. It can be cold, miserable, damp, and rainy pretty much anywhere. So I wouldn't be surprised if that wound up being the case and that wound up being a potential end game. It also wouldn't surprise me if Saratoga pulled a Keeneland and added some fall dates, which, again, not necessarily tops on my to do list. But to be fair, Del Mar added fall dates, and that's gone fine. I don't want to say it's gone great, but it hasn't diminished the summer meet at all. So I'm willing to at least give that potentially a shot. But there are some things that make me nervous, and I feel like that makes anybody who's familiar with horse racing nervous because there's not a lot in the way of trust going on with decision makers in horse racing at this point right now. And all you have to do to see that is go on horse racing Twitter, and very quickly you'll find out what hardened horse players think is wrong and needs to get fixed. And I'm not saying they're right on everything. I'm not saying, oh my God, everything's on fire, because if everything was on fire, we wouldn't be passionate enough about the game and we wouldn't have this show. I'm not saying that, people. What I am saying is that apathy that we talked about, it's contagious. And it's showing right now in handle, in revenue, and in interest for the product.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% in all of that.
But
But
we're going to end with some good news here. We're going to end talking a little bit about the unofficial start to Kentucky Derby 3-year-old preps, and that's the Grade 3 Lecomte, which goes as race 13 on the 13 race program this coming Saturday at Fairgrounds. First post is 12 p.m. Central Time, 1 p.m. for those of you on the East Coast, 10 a.m. for those of you out West. Post time for the Lecomte, 6 p.m. local time. We've got a field of 8 here, Josh, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. First of all, it's a hell of a background. Secondly, this is a field that I think is pretty darn interesting because a bunch of these horses come out of the same local prep race. And Josh, I think there's a fair amount of early speed in here.
yeah, I obviously the two top choices in this race are gonna be the kind of the rerunning of the gun runner here with Nash and Track Phantom, both coming in as very short prices. I believe Nash is 5-2 and Track Phantom's like 8-5 or 9-5 on the morning line. And they or yeah, 9-5 for Track Phantom, and they kind of have this as, I don't know, a bit of a two horse race, I guess, morning line wise. And yeah, it's just, you kind of look at the speed, right? You got Track Phantom and Nash both want to be forwardly placed and want to go. But then you also have horses like the 8 Awesome Road, who have definitely shown some speed. The one Next Level has shown a bit of speed as well. Awesome Road showed interesting horses, showed sprinter speed first time out. Then went to the Breeders' Futurity and was, I don't know, kind of just nowhere to be found in that race. Didn't even show any speed in there. And then went to the Kentucky Jockey Club, and I think it kind of made a middle move in that spot, but ultimately just faded and fell. But I think he could maybe put a little bit of pace pressure on here. The 6 Lat Long last time out did sit pretty forward as well. Didn't necessarily go super fast, going 23 and 47 and 4. So I definitely see where you're kind of coming from, where you think that there could be a bit of speed in here. I don't know. I looked at this race for quite a while, and I like the alternative. I think to those two horses, at least the logical alternative to those two horses would be a horse like the 5. I think Ethan Energy, but he's the third choice. He's 4-1 in this spot, and I just don't know if the value is going to be there for that type of horse. And what I like about Ethan Energy is last time out, at Fairgrounds. Broke his maiden going a mile and 16th. Did it from off the pace, which at Fairgrounds generally is not what you want to do. You generally want to be within a length throughout, or you want to be on the lead, especially routing, and closed in uh, to a very, very pedestrian pace, going 24 and 1, 48 and 3. So you have a horse who really just didn't show any early speed, sat back and closed into a slow pace with horses that should have had it all their own way, won very impressively. And with these early 3-year-olds, I like to see horses that have passed other horses, and that's is definitely what Ethan Energy has done. So this is probably my top pick in this spot. Being a semi contrarian going against the top two choices, but hey, I'm going with the other Brad Cox in the spot. I don't think I'm really kind of stepping out on a ledge here with this pick. So yeah, I think the five Ethan Energy makes a ton of sense here. But Andrew, where did you kind of land?
So, one quick note before we move on. You mentioned Awesome Road. Awesome Road is the other Brad Cox runner. That one is actually cross entered in a race at Turfway Park on the 20th. So, not sure which one that one will run in yet. So, we may well scratch down to a field of 7. Having said that, while you are at this part of the past performances, let's look at number 7, Track Phantom, who's 9-5 on the morning line. Yes, there's a fair amount of early speed signed on. I am not sold on the gun runner at all. I just wasn't impressed by a number of horses in that particular race. Nash probably needs the lead. It looked like they were trying to teach him something in that particular race, and it just did not take. If Track Phantom goes and Nash goes, at least one of them is going to be broken because I think they both need the lead. And I do think there is other speed in that race. Next Level has some early speed. And really, if you toss the last out effort in the gun runner, hasn't done a whole heck of a lot wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if that horse holds on for third or fourth at a gigantic price. Nash needs the lead, ran a gigantic number 2 back in, running off the screen to break his maiden. May have some talent, but I just don't think offers a lot of value given the likely pace setup. You mentioned Ethan Energy. That one is my second selection. I like the fact that this one took a big step forward, second time out, off of a debut where he clearly had an excuse. He did not break well that day, was last of 11, showed a little bit of late interest rallying for 6th, so could have been worse. Gets a little time off, comes back, runs very professionally, earns a nice figure on both Briz and Bayer. Luis Saez rides for Brad Cox. I like the work tab. Makes a fair bit of sense. But Josh, my top selection is the one breaking right to that one's inside, and that's number 4, Can Group, who comes back to the dirt after running very, very well on turf to end his 2-year-old campaign last year. They started this one out at Ellis Park in a couple of sprint races. Now, this one is a Son of Good Samaritan out of a Street Sense mare. That's distance top and bottom. You do not expect a Son of Good Samaritan and a Street Sense mare to debut going 5 furlongs and run well. Actually showed a little bit that day, closing to be third, beaten 4 lengths. Wide trip that day, encouraging debut. Next time out, he runs into Timberlake, who ran off the screen and came back to run a pretty big race in the Hopeful at Saratoga. It was at that point that trainer Mark Casse decided to try the turf. And when he did, all of a sudden the light bulb came on. This one broke the maiden at Kentucky Downs, won at a big price in the Grade 2 Bourbon over at Keeneland, and then ran in the Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, where he came flying late to finish 4th, beaten 2 lengths by Unquestionable. Unquestionable is a really talented racehorse from the barn of Aidan O'Brien. You'll see him in some of the European classics at some point this year. That's a nice, nice horse. The faster they go early, the better Can Group's chances figure to be. Maybe he's better on turf, but I don't think he's bad on dirt. And I think he's going to get the setup he wants at a pretty nice price. He's 6-1 on the morning line. I think we're going to get that kind of value come post time. And that's where I'm going to take my shot. I'm going to key the 4 and the 5 on top with probably a win bet on the 4 can group. And can group may very well be a lone A in some of those multi race exotics. If this one runs on dirt like he ran on turf to finish that campaign, Josh, I don't think anybody beats him.
I hate horses like this.
I usually do too, because I looked at this race a couple of different times in a couple of different ways. And I looked and I saw, okay, it's January. There's not a lot of turf races for 3-year-olds. Maybe the connections have Derby fever. Maybe they're just trying to see what the horse can do. But then you look at the rest of the field. There's no world beaters in here, especially if you think the Gun Runner wasn't a great race. And I'm not sold on that particular race. So automatically, I sort of downgraded the runners that are coming out of that. If Trek, Phantom, or Nash get loose, they probably win. But I don't think that's the setup either of them are going to get in this particular spot. And if they wind up going fast early, we know Can Group can get the distance. We know he can pass other horses. We know he's in good form. And if he repeats even so much as the effort we saw 2 back in the Bourbon, he's got a big shot. I'll take a swing here because if Can Group rallies to win this race, we're not going to get 6-1 on him anytime soon.
Yeah, I think this horse just screams Derby fever, but I'm not gonna talk somebody off, a price. I mean, 6-1, I think is a little tough to stomach on this type of horse, but it's a shortish field, so I don't think you're really gonna get any kind of huge prices. And I did confirm. It looks like Marcus Hirsch actually tweeted out that the 8 Awesome Road is going to scratch from here.
Okay, so we're
So
down to the field of 7 with
yep,
2 Brad Cox runners. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I thought this was this is the start of the Derby prep season, at least for me. I know there's points have already been given out, but I think this is when it really starts to kind of ramp up. So obviously, stay tuned. We'll have plenty of stuff coming up for that. My guess is we will be returning to the live stream game pretty soon here. So we'll be covering a ton of races. We're going to start ramping back up. But yeah, I thought it'd be fun to just take a look at this kind of first race. Obviously, we have the Southwest next weekend, and I'm sure next week we'll talk a little Pegasus as well. As much as we just sat here and you know, we're hoping for the good old days from when you get Nick's Go types running in this race
Put
rather
it this
than.
way, Josh. If the old rules of the Pegasus were still in place, isn't Cody's Wish in this field?
I
I
mean,
know you
maybe
hate horrible. I know you hate great stories,
I
but
do. I
it's.
do.
I genuinely believe that if the Pegasus is still under the old rules, we get Cody's Wish for at least one more start. And if he winds up exercising the 2-turn demons, that winds up being a big, big win for him. And if he gets beat, he doesn't lose anything because
Well,
his stallion season starts in 6 weeks.
yeah. I do wish that Cody Switch was in this race so I could bet against him. So
Well,
a good
I'll
point.
tell you this, if you hate the favorite, whoever that is in a 12-horse field, you're going to get your price. And if you're looking for something positive, there will be big fields. From a betting standpoint, that's not a bad thing, especially if you have a strong opinion. I just miss when grade 1 races looked like grade 1 races. That's all.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here. Obviously, catch us at wrong_lead on Twitter. I'm at Cherry Drank. Andrew's at Andrew Champagne. We will both be on the Notorious OTB podcast this week. So check that out. Check Chase's podcast out as well. Andrew, I'll catch you later, man.
Sounds good, man. You take it easy and let's make some money this weekend.
Have a good one, guys.